continuing with a technical talk from a true expert in the technical domain who has run a very big consumer property. So our next speaker, Richard Still, is the technical director at Financial Times, owning all the consumer-facing properties, and he's just gone through a major relaunch of the FT.com webpage, and he's going to share his learnings on how he delivered the next generation FinancialTimes.com webpage. This time I'll stay on stage to make sure that your microphone works, because the last two times it didn't, so you have to say a few words and then you get rid of me on the stage.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, everybody can hear you, I think. I can hear you from this distance for sure. Okay, thank you very much. The stage is all yours.
So, hi everyone. We've had a lot of interesting talks today about entrepreneurs and startups. So just to give you a little bit of contrast, the Financial Times is 128 years old. That doesn't mean that innovation and a kind of startup mentality isn't important to us. Actually, it's fundamental to our success. So the FT is a global publisher of financial news. We have 840,000 paid-for customers, and 650,000 of those are digital only. So we're very well traveled on the journey to digital only. All in, we've got a couple of million users a day reading our content, and most importantly for us is all of our content sits behind a strict paywall. In fact, it's really how we survive as a business. So this is a quick snapshot of the new FT.com website. Now, clearly the website is incredibly important for us as a business. So getting it right was fundamental to our success. And we launched it last October. It was a big success for the business. The way that we measure success predominantly is through a metric we called RFV, which is how we measure engagement. So we had a 20% uptick there compared to the old site. Advertising still accounts for around 50% of our revenue. So an increase in ads viewability, again, helps us to survive as a business. And depending on which day you measure it, we're the fastest site in the industry. We spent a lot of time on performance. Again, that's critical to our culture and how we operate. So it's around 2 seconds on desktop, 1.3 on, 2 seconds on mobile, 1.3 on desktop. And the return on investment was around 50%. That's really good for us. And kind of really shows how efficiently we managed to operate as a technology department. So when we came to look at rebuilding FT.com, we actually had two greenfields. We had a greenfield from a technology perspective, but also we had the opportunity to build the team from scratch. So the culture in the team, the people, and the process. And there are three pillars: the tech, the way we use it, and how we choose it; the process that we apply to our product and feature development; and of course our people. And today I'm going to focus really on the technology side of things. We just had a talk about culture, and it's fundamental to us, and that's why that was the first place that we started when we looked at the new site. So we knew we had to be fast. So we had a born-in-the-cloud mentality. So everyone who was involved, not just engineers, design, UX, product, delivery, had a kind of implicitly kind of understood how important the cloud was. All of our engineers in particular have a real bias for action. If you haven't come across this phrase, I think it originates in Amazon. And what it means is you don't have people sitting around waiting to be told what to do. You have self-starters, people you can give a problem to, and they will go away and they will solve it. I never have to worry about micromanaging anyone in my team, and there's around 50 engineers now in that team. We needed to be able to innovate at speed. We couldn't hang around for bigger releases. We had to get products and features out to users quickly, and then we had to know quickly whether or not they were actually delivering value to us. And data is absolutely at the heart of everything that we do at the FT. We have an absolutely enormous preference for as-a-service style technology. So whether it's a platform as a service like Heroku, which we use extensively, software as a service, things like Elasticsearch, or even infrastructure as a service. But we tend to focus on things with very low operational overhead. And we recruit only full-stack engineers, so the language of choice for us is Node.js. When you're working in the presentation tier, that's a kind of very natural fit because your devs can equally work on the back end as they can on the front end. And that has a huge productivity benefit. And our tech choices, well, first and foremost, they had to support our culture. So that generally means things like they're going to be API first, they're going to be modern in their approach, they're going to have a very low operational overhead. There's a couple of other things. We absolutely knew we wanted continuous delivery. So like I said, it comes back to this idea of speed and innovation. So everything that we used had to be kind of compatible with that vision. And we wanted to follow modern software principles and modern approaches to software development. So everything that we chose kind of had to conform to these principles up front. The P word, it's a really dirty word at the FT in the technology department. It's actually procurement. It's really not very exciting, and I apologize for bringing it up, but it's fundamental, actually, if you want to kind of continue to operate at speed, because what you can't have is an incredibly empowered, high-performance delivery team waiting around for 2 or 3 months for a bit of technology to work its way through a procurement process. So it can kill you if you're not careful, and you can force engineering teams to go down technical choices that aren't right for you as a whole. So what did we build? We built the whole of the new presentation tier of FT.com. It's actually 3 years on, a pretty big, complex beast. But to complement that, we built a real-time analytics platform, pretty much from scratch, and we built an email platform, and all of these were built in the same model. And the reason why I brought them together here is because they complement each other. I've already mentioned how important data is to us, but actually getting access to that data quickly was pretty fundamental. We have a whole team of data scientists looking at that data, but previously we had delays of up to 48 hours, and that just wasn't good enough for what we wanted to do. Finally, the email platform, email is pretty old school, but it's still a really important channel for us. It drives a lot of engagement with the site. And having something that works seamlessly and was built in the same way as our site was built was pretty important. So we built an HTTP microservices architecture. So there's hundreds of applications now spread across those 3 platforms that I've mentioned. We're released to production 10 to 20 times a day, depending on what's going on. We followed a 12-factor app methodology. I don't know if any of you have come across that. It was kind of written by the guys at Heroku, and it's a fantastic guide for kind of how to build very nicely scaling applications. And we, of course, instrument absolutely everything. We use Graphite for that, so this is kind of machine instrumenting our platform because we use our real-time analytics for instrumenting data. But both of those things are, again, critical to how we work. So this is an incredibly simplified view of what we built. You get a little bit of a feel. You can see that Heroku is the thing that is serving, doing all the hard work in terms of executing our applications. How many of you actually even come across Heroku? Okay, not many. So Heroku is a platform as a service. It is incredibly easy to get software running on Heroku. It takes perhaps, 10 or 15 seconds to bootstrap an app and be serving web traffic on a Heroku container. So that's what we used. I'll talk a bit more about it later. Fastly does all our heavy lifting when it comes to production loads. We do vary enormously, and that's one of the reasons that we chose Fastly, is because we have split testing and personalization built right into the heart of the stack. It's not something that's bolted onto the front end. It's something that happens across the entire estate. And we use Elasticsearch that underpins pretty much everything. And click. So something that sets apart the email platform and the data analytics platform from FT.com is that you could go into the market and buy really big, really expensive off-the-shelf products that meets, at least on paper, the needs of the business. The problem is they don't. You pay a lot of money and you get big bloated software that kind of meets your needs but actually turns out to be quite difficult to work with. So what we did is we took our own culture and we looked at the best-in-class commoditized tech. So what we don't want to do as a business is care about the logistics of delivering 500 million emails a year. It's just, there's nothing in it for us. So we found a vendor. There's a couple out there who are really good, API-first, modern companies. SendGrid and SparkPost were the ones that we looked at. And we built on top of that, using small, agile teams, exactly the features that the business needed. So it was incredibly targeted functionality. And the same is true for NGDA. We strung together a load of low-overhead AWS technologies. We wrote the bits that we really needed to write. And again, we just targeted the needs of the business very, very specifically. And then we were able to kind of move on and deliver value elsewhere. So a bit about our stack. We only have one environment, and that is production. That has lots of advantages. You don't have to worry about syncing up a pre-prod or a test. Developers can spend the time delivering value to the business instead of worrying about lots of environments. Because of the tool chain that we've got and the platforms that we've chosen, we do have other environments. It's just that they only exist for perhaps 20 seconds. So as our build process is running, we will spin up an application on Heroku with a new version of the software. We'll run some tests. If everything passes, we'll simply destroy it and deploy to production. So all in, that process takes around 10 minutes. So it's easy to do, and it's cost-effective. So Heroku has a couple of different types of container. They're called dynos. You have standard, which is a kind of small amount of memory and a small amount of CPU, and you can kind of run small, lightweight applications on those without a problem. The downside of those is they're fairly highly contended, and what you'll see is anything that you really have on the performance critical path, you'll see a big drop-off when it comes to the kind of 95th percentile. So we fork out extra for the bits that really matter, which in Heroku's example is they're called performance dynos. So Heroku kind of came to us via Salesforce. Salesforce bought them, and it was kind of free, and we were like, oh, look at that, it's a shiny toy. Let's play with it a bit. So we did, and for a while we just used it for supporting services on the old website. And then about halfway through the rebuild of FT.com, we kind of realized that Heroku was actually a pretty mature platform. We had spent a tiny proportion of our kind of very precious engineering time on tooling to get our CI and CD environments up and running. And we thought, well, actually, what we can do is we can use this for production. So we talked to Salesforce and we talked to Heroku, and we decided that when it came to launch, we would kind of have FT.com, this thing that underpins several thousand jobs, running on Heroku. And that was a big step change for us as a business, because we were kind of accepting that our kind of whole existence was now pinned on these third-party PaaS providers. What we do though is run in multiple regions. Some of you may have experienced AWS's outage a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago. They don't happen very often, and neither do Heroku's little wobbles, but it's not good enough for us to be down for the amount of time that AWS was down, for example, in the US. So we run everything in multiple regions, and that kind of mitigates that kind of final bit of risk. So AWS, there's a whole host of technologies. That's not all of them. Elasticsearch is fundamental, as I mentioned before. All of our content is ultimately served via Elasticsearch. What you'll see in common with all of these, so there's Kinesis and SQS and SNS, is that it's almost no effort to run these things. You might put a little bit of effort into right-sizing them and making sure that you've got your scale correct. And of course, you need to monitor them a little bit. But the operational overhead is tiny. We don't have to worry about emptying log files or patching servers. All of that problem has been taken away from us. And we gain that opportunity, or rather we don't pay the opportunity cost, and that's what's so critical here. It isn't so much the cost of operating something to start with. It's what you don't get to build when you're doing that. So DevOps has been quite a journey for us as an organization. And actually this switch to low operational overhead hosted services like Heroku and AWS mean that the traditional tasks that first and second line support don't really exist anymore. So it's really kind of accelerated that discussion, because when we tend to have a problem in production, it isn't something that first and second line are going to be able to solve. It's something that can only be solved by people who are kind of intimate with the code. And first and second line engineers simply aren't going to have the expertise. So this change in approach kind of helped accelerate change in other parts of the business. So to kind of wrap it all up, the publishing industry as a whole is under a huge amount of pressure. And for us and everyone else to survive, we absolutely have to be able to innovate. We have to be able to behave like a startup. And people like myself need to be able to act as entrepreneurs, because if we don't, then we're not going to survive. The pressures on us are too great from people like Twitter and Facebook and Google. All of the traditional revenue streams that the publishing industry have enjoyed for the past 128 years are no longer really there. And our change in approach, our change in culture, kind of fundamentally allowed that to happen. And for the time being, we're all going to live happily ever after. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Wow. You're the second speaker finishing ahead of time, I think. So that is fantastic. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Now you brought me out of concept.